Hi, dear investors and supporters. Today I'm going to try this new format to provide you quarterly update on the fund. I will also be talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and its potential long-term impact on investments. As you can expect, the first quarter was a very difficult one. The fund suffered largest loss since its inception in February 2018. It was also the first time the fund and the market had 3 consecutive months of negative return. But relatively speaking, the fund had performed better than the market and the benchmark. In Q1, the fund declined 9.6%, while the benchmark Russell 3000 Healthcare Index was down by 12.66%. I did take a conservative stance entering 2020 with a relatively high cash position at about 10%, which helped lessen the impact of market sell-off. The broad market suffered largest quarterly loss since 2008 to 2009 financial crisis. As you can see from this chart, all sectors of the S&P 500 had double-digit loss in Q1, with energy leading the way with over 50% decline. The broader indexes, S&P 500 and Russell 3000, were down about 20%, helped by relatively better performance of technology, healthcare, consumer staples, and utilities. FHL Healthcare Fund, as shown in green bar, did better than the benchmark, which is shown in yellow bar, and all other indices. The difference between this sell-off with previous ones is that this one came in very suddenly. Indeed, is a black swan event that no one foresaw its coming. Even when China was battling with the virus, the US market kept going up and made a record high on February 19th. However, in a matter of a month, the market turned south, declining 34% from the peak to the trough on February 23rd. The 2008-2009 sell-off took much longer. It was 6 months. This time around, the government response has been really quick and swift and unprecedented. The Fed immediately injected 1.5 trillion cash into the market, not only supporting the financial institutions, but also non-financial corporate bond market. The Fed balance sheet swelled to 5.2 trillion, an all-time high. A large economic relief package was quickly passed in the Congress and signed by President Trump, handing out 2.2 trillion cash to individuals and businesses, which is going to happen in the next 3 weeks. And more fiscal and monetary aids are believed to be forthcoming if the pandemic persists much longer. These unprecedented government responses serve to temporarily support the market. As you can see, S&P 500 actually rebounded more than 10% from the bottom. Now I'm going to turn to the pandemic situation and give you my view of how we can get out of this disaster. This is indeed a global pandemic. The data shown here are 2 days old, taken from WHO situation report number 72 on April 1st. The total confirmed cases in the world is now above 800,000. In fact, today is above a million. And more than 40,000 people died. the global fatality rate was almost 5%. US has the largest number of confirmed cases, while Italy and Spain both surpassed China in total number of confirmed cases. Fatality rate in the US was relatively low at 1.7%. The fatality rate among different countries ranges widely. I think when the healthcare system is under stress by a large number of hospitalized patients, fatality rate tends to be higher. The outlook is still very uncertain. These charts are taken from Johns Hopkins University coronavirus website yesterday. As you can see in the top left, the number of new cases has significantly come down in China and South Korea. Epidemiologists call this flattening of the infection curve. Italy, as shown in bottom left, may have seen the worst. The new infection is coming down a little bit. But Japan, US, and Germany are still seeing new cases rising at a pretty large rate. One of the insidious properties of this virus is asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic transmission. The virus stays in the patient for an unusually long period of time, 3 weeks, as opposed to 10 to 14 days for other respiratory viruses like the flu. Before symptom onset, the infected patient can transmit the virus. And some patients don't even show any symptom, but they can still infect others, making this extremely difficult to control. Because of these reasons, an extended period of strict social distancing measures, I think, may be required to stop the virus spread. China took 2 months to bring down new infections to 0. I think we don't have to bring it down to 0, but we still need 2 months probably to flatten the curve so that our healthcare system won't be overwhelmed by a large number of hospitalizations. Although China has brought down the curve, I think a rebound is still a big risk as China start to return the business to normal and people start to come out and resume their normal life. I think the asymptomatic carriers are still around and the risk of rebounding is still large. I think now it's almost a consensus. COVID-19 will be here to stay. It won't disappear like SARS back in 2003. The virus may rebound. The virus may bounce back and forth between the south and north hemispheres in the winter season. Now I'm going to talk about the drug and vaccine development efforts. Because the virus may stay with us for a long time, I think finding an effective treatment and ultimately finding an effective vaccine is the solution. The striking thing about COVID-19 is that it is actually a disease of many different illnesses. What I mean by that is the virus causes different symptoms in different people for reasons that we still don't know. Some people, actually up to 50% of total infection in Iceland, for example, show no symptoms. A significant percentage of infected people show only mild symptoms. I think the data from China was 80%. And these people can self-recover without much medical intervention. However, 10 to 20% of infection led to serious lung disease and even multiple organ failures. And fatality rates among the people in ICU is very high, over 50%. And that is why I don't think we may have a drug that works in every patient. I don't think we can find a silver bullet or a game changer drug. On the therapeutic front, we have a few promising candidates. I think all of us by now have heard about hydroxychloroquine. There is some anecdotal evidence from China and France that this drug, which was anti-malarial drug, may work in some mild symptom patients. It can speed up patient recovery and prevent disease progression. But we still need to wait a little while for the results from a randomized controlled clinical trials. If this does work, it will be helpful, but I don't think it's sufficient to change the course of this pandemic. Another drug that's promising is a direct antiviral drug. This is a drug developed by Gilead Sciences. Gilead Sciences had this drug for Ebola a few years ago, but it didn't work in the clinical trials. People tried this on coronavirus in cell culture, and they found this drug can inhibit coronavirus very effectively. That's why it gave us hope that it may also work in human body. We will know whether this is going to work very soon, actually in this month. The clinical trial results will come out in the month of April. If it works, I think it may only work in a subset of patients. There are other drugs under development, such as anti-IL-6, interleukin-6 antibodies. Again, this is a drug that may only work in a subset of patients, and those patients will experience cytokine storms, which is a deadly inflammatory response, can leading to multiple organ failures. I think the best hope is therapeutic antibodies, but that's at least 6 months away. Obviously, vaccine would be the ultimate solutions. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson in the US have already started human trials. And I know that some companies in China also started human trials in the middle of March. Still, it will be 12 to 18 months away before we can see whether these vaccines work. In terms of the approaches to control COVID-19, there are 3 different approaches taken by different countries. China and many East Asian countries took the eradication strategy. They had success with this strategy to control SARS last time. The strategy involves early testing to identify patients quickly and then isolate them and trace all the people who had contact with the infected patients. Treat the patients early to reduce fatality. This strategy worked well in China, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. But economic costs of these drastic measures are very severe. It is short in duration though. So it's basically a short-term pain, long-term gain type of strategy. But the Western countries mainly adopted the mitigation strategy. The goal here is not to eradicate the virus, which is simply too difficult and involves sacrifices of privacy and personal freedom, which is much harder to do in Western countries. However, I think the strategy can still bring down the infection curve to a level that it won't exceed the threshold of the healthcare capacity. If this strategy carried out effectively, I think we can still achieve the desired outcome without incurring huge economic costs. But that remains to be seen. The third approach is a controversial one, herd immunity. So far, I'm only aware of Sweden taking that strategy. This strategy has the lowest economic cost, but whether it works remains to be seen. Even if it works, I think it may only work in smaller countries with a good healthcare system like Sweden. Now, what lies ahead and how can we get out of this? I think we'll have to go through three stages. The first stage is where we are now. We have to continue the social distancing practice for a sufficient period of time to flatten the infection curve. I think 2 months may be required. Once the number of infection is below the healthcare capacity threshold, and we can start to, and also we need treatment options for the disease, then we can enter the second stage in which social distancing can be relaxed a little bit. We'll continue to treat mild patients, mild symptom patients with, we need a pill. So the patients can take them at home. For the more severe patients that will be treated in the hospitals, we need some treatment options for them to keep the fatality rate low. The rest of us can go back to kind of semi-normal life. And the second stage is just a bridging step to the final solution, vaccine. Once we have an effective vaccine, we can finally control the pandemic and return to normalcy. But that won't happen until perhaps late 2021. So what are the long-term impact in terms of on our investments? I'm going to offer my view. I think COVID-19 is a wake-up call, just as September 11 was a wake-up call. COVID-19 is an act of the nature, while September 11 obviously was an act of terrorists. But just as terrorism is an ongoing threat, pandemic will be an ongoing threat. We need to build redundancy in our healthcare system to better respond to emergencies like this. We need to significantly increase investments in basic research of pandemic and pathogens. In China, investments are already being made in directed into building a surveillance system and tracing system. That's already happening. In terms of new technologies, I think there are some technologies will see wider adoption, like sequencing, diagnostics, and telemedicine. Finally, I think e-commerce for healthcare may be here to stay. Another critical issue is the supply chain of medical equipment. This pandemic revealed that the problem of complex global supply chain, the fact that it takes months for the US to ramp up production of PPEs, highlighted the need to bring some of the supply chains back onshore. I think this is going to be a reversal of globalization. I also want to point out a big risk that I see and maybe overlooked by a lot of people. That is the mistrust and even antagonism between US and China during this pandemic. This is a very worrying trend. I'm really concerned about this. And this is actually a continuation from the trade dispute. And now we have one more problem to worry about. I hope this is not just an election year problem, but we need to monitor this, and it's it could be a potential risk going forward. And that's all I have for today. I hope you all will stay healthy and optimistic. It is bad that our life is disrupted, but I think we are fortunate that we can work from home. We can spend some time with our families and do things we have long wanted to do but never found time to do, like watching a movie together, working in the backyard, uh, or trying a new recipe. This is also a time to remember those who are less fortunate than us, who have lost their jobs and income. Let us be generous to other people. Let's keep our hope. Humans have overcome much bigger challenges than this before. I think we'll go through this and we'll come out stronger. Thank you for watching. If you have any question, please don't hesitate to contact me. Goodbye.